is if people who would like to ask questions, if you could come forward and form a single line just here in the middle. And then anybody with accessibility or mobility issues, if you can just raise your hand and then we'll have a roving microphone to come around and take your questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, just come forward and form a single file line.
Darren, maybe could it be at the side slightly?
No, we can move. We can move.
Yeah.
We'll move.
This is a question to Mr. Hoenig. Mr. Hoenig stated that the Labor Shadow Cabinet has decided not to go ahead with WestConnex if they've been in office. Is that the total WestConnex or just the connecting tunnel between Camperdown and Tempe?
The Shadow Cabinet has adopted the view that I have been expressing in respect to the WestConnex for two and a half years. The M5 East and its duplication is part of what we say is a integrated transport strategy to be able to move freight firstly by rail from the port. We can't just draw a line on a map and announce a duplication project. Since 1977, the simplest inquiry, then the Kirby inquiry in 1981, and then the Bradley inquiry in 2005 have been recommendations of movement of containers by rail, and to the extent of 40%. When the port was expanded, it was then operating at 24%, it's now down to 12%. There is Enfield Intermodal facility about to come online. There are decisions to be made either Eastern Creek or Moorebank in respect of further inland ports. And so you have to go through the exercise. There's also for 25 million a duplication of the rail link to link up with the 300 million that the federal government has spent on the Chullora rail link. So you have to go through an exercise of seeing how many containers you can actually get on rail before you can then design a roadway to service the port. You can't move all the containers by rail. You do have to move, and you do have to open Australia's busiest port. So I have been advocating a duplication of the M5 and moving the containers by rail for 30 years. That view is no different to the view that I've been talking about since about 1981.
Yes, if you'd like to make a response.
Call me cynical, but it seems like we're hearing a different response from Labor on the WestConnex every time we get a question asked. Like that's a very different response to what Verity Firth's given at the forum in Balmain, what Penny Sharp's given in forums in Newtown. And again, call me cynical, but it seemed as though that the Labor plan on WestConnex was mainly about shoring up the marginal seat of Newtown rather than actually delivering what residents want, which is no motorway anywhere and investment in public transport. What's confusing me with the plan about, so we're talking about an M5 East extension, but we're also talking about rail. The M5 East is a roadway. The plan that Labor's put forward is to extend that roadway through the inner west, through the inner city, all the way to Port Botany. But now we're talking about a rail connection. Like, I absolutely support, and the Greens absolutely support investment in rail freight. That's not what the Labor plan for the M5 extension and the WestConnex is. And I think it's really important in the lead up to the election we get full and frank details from both the Liberal Party and potentially the Labor opposition, who could potentially be in government. What are they going to do? If Luke Foley is Premier on the 29th of March, are they going to build a road through the electorate of Heffron? Are they going to acquire houses? Where are they going to build the interchanges? We need to get those answers before the election, rather than cross our fingers and hope that everything will be okay after March the 28th.
Specific answer, and that is that the duplication of the M5 East has been costed as far back as 2007 at $8 billion and hasn't been proceeded with. And you cannot proceed with it until you can work out how many containers you can actually get on the rail. And the M5 East does not go through the boundaries of Heffron at all, and the M5 East is not intended to go through the boundaries of Heffron. In fact, the M5 East, the moving containers on rail, will get those container trucks off a lot of the Heffron roads.
Okay, we'll move to the next question. If you could, just before your questions, state your name and where you're from, if you can. And then also, if possible, to address your questions to both candidates.
My name is Michael Dandy. I live in St Peters, and my question is simply this. Given the current Liberal government haven't released a business case for WestConnex, and given the events down in Victoria where the Andrews government subsequently did release a business case study for the East West Link, which would prove to be a financial disaster, would the Labor government or Green government, should they come in, release the entire business case study for this project so we can all see whether it stands up as a business or not, as the case may be?
Patrick, we have, sorry Ron, we'll have Osman first this time.
I'll be very quick. You came to see me at a mobile office, didn't you, in St Peters? Yes, I've already met you before. The answer is yes, we'd release it because we think what the Liberals are doing as far as the WestConnex is just a fraud on the people. The previous federal government knew it was a fraud on the people, and I think they should be exposed by the public production of all their material.
Thanks. Yeah, in agreement there, absolutely. The business case for this and all future infrastructure projects should be released. I think the interesting thing here is, as we know, Labor's committed to building stage 1 and stage 2 of the WestConnex, but they've admitted they haven't even seen the business case. So you can argue that that's potentially even stranger than the Liberals' position. They've seen the business case, they won't release it, they're going to build it. Labor hasn't seen the business case and they're still going to build 2/3 of it. Infrastructure Australia pointed out in Senate estimates last month that the business case that they've looked at, and they've seen it in detail in the way public haven't, estimates costs at what's called P50. So there's a 50% chance that the cost could actually be higher than what the business case estimates it to be. Now, general best practice in engineering is P90, so there's only a 10% chance of it being high. The more we delve into the business case, the less and less it stacks up. And as I mentioned earlier, unlike the East-West Link business case, the WestConnex business case, according to the Auditor General and according to Infrastructure Australia, does not account for reduced traffic. It is pretending as though when the WestConnex is built, the number of cars won't increase, when the whole point of the motorway is apparently to get extra cars onto the WestConnex.
Yes, hello. Darrell Duncan. I'm from Tempe. I'm an interloper, I suppose. Thank you. I want to ask both candidates a question that was prompted by how you began your speech, Ron, by everybody should get a fair go. And I want to talk about a fair go for women and particularly a fair go for women's reproductive rights. For the last 40 years, we have been trying to have abortion decriminalised and taken out of the Crimes Act. So I want to ask both candidates, how would you, I understand that there is a bill that has been introduced into the Parliament which needs support to be even read, and that bill is to take abortion out of the Crimes Act. So I want to know how you, both candidates, would facilitate the reading of that bill and how you would advance that bill through the lower house and the upper house, how you would work with your colleagues to make sure that this becomes a reality.
Osman, did you want to take that one first?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you very much for the question. The Greens and me as an individual are 100% committed to supporting the reproductive rights of all women, a woman's right to choose. I believe it's a Greens bill introducing into the upper house to decriminalise abortion. A lot of people I talk to aren't actually aware that abortion is still in the Crimes Act in New South Wales, and it's only a court ruling that allows it to occur in the instances of a negative impact on a woman's mental health, social well-being and economic circumstances. That can mean in some instances, particularly in small rural and regional communities where a doctor won't sign off on that, a woman can't procure an abortion if that's what she wants. So I think it's a no-brainer to get it out of the Crimes Act and to treat it like any other medical issue. And I'm proud that because it's Greens policy, every single Greens MP would vote for it in the upper house and in the lower house.
The common law of New South Wales, as determined by Judge Bolter, effectively gives a woman a right to choose, and that is the interpretation of the legislation. Bearing in mind what the common law has been since Judge Bolter's decision, my view is that these things turn out to a conscience vote, and my view would be unwise to enact a bill to try and enact a bill and create a dissension over an issue that the common law really provides for in any event.
Hi, my name's Warren. I live in St Peters. The question I've got is in regards to directly with Heffron. The WestConnex road seems to be built on the 1950s road corridor in St Peters. My question is, will you lift this road corridor off the RMS lift, and all other RMS affected properties within your electorate?
Ron, would you like to deal with that first?
We have said that we would immediately stop the proposed acquisition of the houses.
Would you lift?
Well, we have said that we would stop the acquisition of the houses and we would not proceed with the interchange. And at this stage, and I can see no reason for a road widening to be at that location. But I need to have a look at the details because they affect the title of all the properties and make sure that it's appropriate and lawful to do so. Just simply making a promise in the candidates for binding a government or a party without having to see the history of it and the LEP that's currently over the property would be a bit presumptuous.
Sorry, can I just add one more piece to that? The road widening was lifted on the properties on Edgware Road. So if it can be done for them, why can't it be done for everyone else in Heffron?
Well, that's a good question, and I'd like to find out why it was done in Edgware Road and why consistent policy couldn't apply to Campbell Street. But I don't have the details to give you a commitment, but I can give you a commitment that I would certainly favour examining it to give the people who live there a certainty. I mean, it's staggering to me that people have bought there recently for $1 million. To proceed down the route of acquisition is financial lunacy if fair compensation has to be paid for acquisition. So I don't think there's a lot of substance in proceeding with the road widening, but I can't give you an absolute guarantee without looking at it in some detail.
Ron, can I suggest something? If you are able to do that research and perhaps provide us with an answer, we'll post it on the ARAG website. Is that possible?
And I'm not just talking about Campbell Street, I'm talking all of Heffron.
But with all the road widenings all through Heffron,
No, this.
I mean that's talking about removing road widening proposals for roads like Botany Road or for roads or for areas where in Mascot where open space is supposed to occur as a result of road widening. So it's not that sort of simple concept because road widening proposals are often designed to achieve not just widening roads but to create open space and a variety of other public infrastructure investments like squares and things of that nature. So you need to look at each one of them, look at the history and look at the projections before you do them. You just can't do them in isolation.
Just add a couple of things. I think you're right. I think it was in 2011 or just before 2011, the state election, when the state government shifted the road widening away from Edgware in the state electorate of Marrickville, which at the time was another marginal Greens Labor seat, but left it in Heffron, which is a safer seat for Labor, I guess you could say. We know that the WestConnex has been planned for a long time. We know it's a politically contentious issue, and a few people that I've spoken to around St Peters, around Tempe, have remarked to me that it seems like that was done to save a Labor seat for politics, to protect residents there. But what it's done is it's left residents in Heffron with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety. So I think other than roadworks that don't require compulsory business and home acquisitions in Heffron, there's no need for them to occur because the Greens don't think that motorways are the way to resolve Sydney and New South Wales transport problems. It's public transport and it's cycling.
Hi, thanks for coming along tonight. My question is off WestConnex. It's about Isabel and I live in Alexandria. My question is about the environment. There are things that we can fix between generations if we do it wrong in one, but with the environment we don't get a second chance. And in New South Wales at the moment there's a broad-based movement campaigning to stop coal. This is really for Mr Hoenig, because I know the Greens' position on it is, why doesn't Labor have a planned transition out of coal when we understand the impact not just on land and water but also the long-term climate impact, and why is Labor still supporting mining in the Sydney drinking water catchments?
Well, there should be no mining in the Sydney water catchment area in my view. So if there is an area where you say Labor supports it, you should draw it to my attention so I can address it.
There are 5 longwall coal mines operating day and night in the special catchments of the drinking water catchments. And they're damaging creeks, they're cracking riverbeds with the subsidence, they're damaging precious swamps, and they're creating huge risk for the future to the dams and where Sydney gets all its water from. So I'm not talking about the coal seam gas that could potentially happen in the catchments, because there are still licences there. I'm talking about the coal and the expansion of coal that is still going on in the catchments.
I'm not an apologist, and I never have been. It was a condition of me standing in the by-election in 2012. I'm not an apologist for previous Labor government decisions. The Labor Party was thrown out on its ear in March 2011, and my view was that the people were right and it deserved to be. It's unfortunate that the rest of us now get punished over 4 years by having the Libs and their philosophy impacted upon us. But the way in which the vested interests of the mining have controlled the planning and mining process of this state, and in fact in this country, has been disgraceful. And the vested interests have infected just about every facet of government decision-making process. In my view, the solution to address it is getting your Environmental Planning and Assessment Act right, making sure that your planning policies are transparent and they dictate where you can or you cannot mine, so that the decision makers have before them the impact of the proposal. The other thing that I advocate, and it's actually been slipped into a recent amendment to the Planning Act, and the government didn't know about it, so I went quiet about it. Because it was buried away in the white paper as well. And that is that I believe that where a consent authority is misled as to the environmental impacts or the impacts of an application, then those people should be prosecuted and they should go to jail. Because the reality of the situation is this, that they prepare these dodgy environmental impact statements. They assert to a consent authority that this is going to be the environmental impact statement. And then you find the impact of either coal seam gas or longwall mining or any other environmental activity, destruction of the environment. So I actually sought to move some amendments to create offences that allowed you to prosecute these people on indictment, so that you could actually start sending executives to jail for 7 years for misleading consent authorities. I've also proposed as well that we accredit authors of environmental impact statements. I mean, you could put a shingle on the wall and be the author of an environmental impact statement. There should be licensing, just like doctors and lawyers and accountants. They should be licensed so that there's some integrity in the process. So I'm not an apologist, but I would like to see that those people responsible for misleading the consent authorities, I would like to see them being jailed for doing it.
Osman, did you want to add some comments?
I'll just be brief, because I think, as Isabel mentioned, and as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the Greens are strongly opposed to coal mining, coal seam gas mining across New South Wales. The issue about planning and environmental legislation is an interesting one. We had 16 years of a Labor government, and the end result of that was the notorious Part 3A legislation, which allowed the state government to declare development as state significant and run roughshod over the local community. Now, I'm actually pleased, and I'm not trying to just be negative here tonight, I'm really pleased that the Labor Party and the local member for Heffron have signed up to the Better Planning Network Community Charter, and I really hope that if they do end up in government, they commit to those principles. But I think more than that, we need to ensure that we've got strong community campaigns on the ground in terms of fighting for a transition away from coal mining, fighting against coal seam gas mining, but also fighting for fairer and better development across cities to ensure that any future government, whether it's Labor, Liberal or Green, is held accountable to the people.
Hi, I'm Rosa Shear. I'm here at student at Newtown High School of the Performing Arts. I just got a simple question. Why are both of you running fantasy?
Osman, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Thank you so much. It sort of picks up a little bit on what I was saying earlier. I joined the Greens, as Vanessa mentioned at the start, when I was 15. I'm probably one of those people that a few decades ago might have been a traditional Labor supporter. I'm a proud trade unionist. I believe very strongly in social justice, equality and fairness. I'm also really, really concerned about the environment and the future that we leave to future generations. I got involved when I was living for a brief stint in Port Macquarie on the mid-north coast, and I was seeing the impacts of coastal erosion, seeing the impacts of overdevelopment firsthand. And at that time we had a federal Labor opposition that was caving in to the federal Howard government on issues like refugees, on issues like asylum seekers. We had a state Labor government that was running roughshod of local communities, was acting in what ICAC's found to be corrupt ways, and was running roughshod over local communities when it came to planning. I thought that I didn't want to stand on the sidelines. I wanted to get involved. I wanted to get involved in community groups. I got involved in things like the Australian Youth Climate Coalition. I got involved with student activism at university. And I decided to run for election in 2015 in New South Wales because I really care about this area and I really care about the future of New South Wales. And I think running for Parliament isn't the only way to affect change, but you do get the opportunity to talk to thousands of people across the electorate, get the opportunity to address forums like this, and you get to push things forward a little bit. And I think by running as an MP and by working with community, we're ensuring that New South Wales is a better place for the future. So thanks for that question, it's really good.
When I was about your age, the only thing I wanted to do was to be a barrister, to stand up in front of the jury, dressed up in one of those robes and white wigs, and be able to advocate the innocence of my client. And for 25 years I did just that. The greatest pleasure of my life was to fight for the oppressed and the Indigenous and the indigent and be able to give them another chance in life if the law allowed it. I indulged my political views by volunteering as Mayor of a council for about 30 years, and over that period of time a number of Labor leaders asked me whether I'd consider running for Parliament. One Premier, I said to him, who's going to pay my school fees? But ultimately I reached a stage when the former member resigned where I really had enough and I wanted to be heard. I hate the three-word slogans. I hate the promises people make that there's some magic solution to fix things. That somehow or other you can wave a magic wand and you can actually transform a community. I hated the dishonesty of politicians in both political parties. I couldn't understand why they kept making commitments that they never intended to keep or be able to fund. And so I thought a couple of years ago that it is about time I stepped up and contributed and would be heard in respect of my views. And those of you who looked at Hansard, I'm not backwards at coming forward in expressing my views about a range of activities. And I can say this, as a local member, fighting particularly for the oppressed and the poor and the prejudiced in the community, people who have no chance in life, and be able to give them a quality of life in area 300 metres from here, has probably given me as much pleasure as being able to give an Aboriginal kid from the country another go as well. So I've seen it as a way in which you can make a real tangible difference, not just talk about it, but actually do it.
Kate Kennedy from Macdonaldtown, and I'm also a friend of Erskineville. My question is, I don't know if it's true, it is for Osman. Do the Greens have a policy regarding Sydney Airport, and what is the policy of the airport line, which I think, it was a mistake not to have, privatised. Could you enlarge on that, and also, what do you think about it too, Ron?
Question specifically about the airport line or the airport more generally?
Both.
So as I mentioned, the policy that we've announced as part of our $4.5 billion transport plan for New South Wales includes, I think it's roughly $400 million to buy back the airport line from the private operators. It was a giant mistake of the former Labor government to outsource that airport line. All it's done is deliver millions of dollars of revenue from punters using the airport, whether it's tourists coming in or residents in Sydney, and made it more expensive, and that's led to congestion on roads. So the Greens plan is, by buying back that line and reducing the station access fee, make it easier for people to travel to the airport without having to get in a car or in a cab. The policy the Greens have around the airport, it's a long-standing Greens policy that in the long term, Sydney Airport is not a viable position. Sorry, the Kingsford Smith, where it's located now, is not a viable position for the airport. I've got to say, personally, I live pretty close to the airport, so I like being able to catch a cab for 5 minutes down to the airport. But I also understand that, where that policy comes from, because, so for example, Sydney to Melbourne, it's the 4th busiest air route in the world. How do other countries deal with travel in areas like that? They build high-speed rail. They don't have a route like Sydney to airport being catered to by air travel. They have it catered to by high-speed rail. So I think in the long term, I think the Greens policy is pretty clear in saying we don't have any plans to shut down Sydney Airport tomorrow. What we want to do is plan. We want to plan for the future. We want to look at other options. We don't think Badgerys Creek is viable. The Labor members out there don't think Badgerys Creek is viable either at a federal level. And we want to make sure that when we plan for future travel, whether it's air, rail or road, we're taking into account the whole spectrum of things, so high-speed rail as well.
I'm sorry, Osman, I didn't understand. When is Sydney Airport, when do you envision it being closed? And
I don't envision it being closed anytime soon. I think what I'm saying is that we've got a policy that we've got on paper to, in the long term, plan away from where the airport currently is. But it's not part of our transport vision for this election. It's not part of our $4.5 billion plan. I understand there was a bit of a hatchet job story on 7 News tonight that maybe this has prompted the question. This election campaign, we've got a very clear plan to divert funding away from the WestConnex and to build public transport in the area. We don't have any plans in the short term, in the medium term, to pack up Sydney Airport. And the only time we ever would move the airport away is if we've identified viable sites and we've got future travel options like high-speed rail that make it viable and appropriate to do.
I'm no apologist for past sins of the Labor Party, but I can tell you that it was Bruce Baird, Mike Baird's father, that entered into the arrangement of the airport rail link. And CRI and Qantas contributed $133 million towards its construction. And the Bruce Baird contributed $700 million towards its construction. And it was, not only did they construct, outsource that rail line, they also entered into agreements so that you couldn't run even more than one bus service to the airport. So I used to describe the airport rail link as the ghost train, because nobody was ever on it and nobody was at Mascot or Green Square Station. And can I tell you, to go one stop from the airport to Green Square or to the airport to Mascot cost you $15 to go one stop. Now, one of the things that my predecessor as Premier did 2 weeks out from the last state election was she removed the station access fee from Mascot and Green Square. In other words, paid for by the Treasury. And as a result, there has been, as you